Are you interested in finding out how cognitive behavioral therapy helps social anxiety disorder? Well, I'm going to walk you through that in this video. CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is the leading recommendation for treatment for social anxiety disorder, which can be an incredibly painful, debilitating problem, and yet help is available. For those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Barbara Heffernan, and I'm a psychotherapist and an online coach and a Buddhist and a mindfulness meditation instructor. And I bring all of those things together on this channel to help people live a more joyful life. So if you support what I'm doing here, please do give me a thumbs up on this video and also subscribe to my channel. The button, I think, is right down there to subscribe. So today I'm going to give you a brief explanation of what cognitive behavioral therapy is. I'm going to let you know why it helps and how it helps social anxiety. And I'm also going to give you 3 tips you can implement today to start yourself on the journey of recovery. And stay till the end of the video because I'm going to give you those 3 tips and also provide you with some free resources that I'm hoping can be helpful for you now. And I also want to let you know about a new program that I'm introducing. If you are willing and interested in really diving deep and doing deep personal work and really figuring yourself out so you can lower your anxiety so you can live a happier life. I will provide the link to that program below, and let me know if you have any questions about it at all, and check it out. Let's get started. Cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the best researched therapy techniques that we have, and it is highly recommended for social anxiety. So let me give you a brief explanation of what cognitive behavioral therapy is. So cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the fact that we have cognitions, our thoughts, we have our behaviors, and we have our feelings. And feelings have both physical and emotional components. And CBT tells us that how we think impacts how we behave and how we feel. How we behave impacts how we think and how we feel. And how we feel impacts how we think and how we behave. Makes sense, right? We are all connected. And when people come into my office, they say, Barbara, I want to feel better. But the basis of CBT is that you will not feel better until you can change how you think or change how you behave. And so both of those components are critically important. And working with CBT with a therapist, the therapist and you will work together to come up with which thoughts can you change, which thoughts need to be changed, and how do you do that, and then which behaviors can be changed. And sometimes if you are stuck and you can't change how you think, you need to change a behavior. Or on the other hand, if you really can't change a behavior, you might need to change how you think. But changing how you feel is not going to be the initial step on this process. So let's talk about how this cycle works for somebody with social anxiety disorder. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Let's start with the example of somebody who exhibits physical symptoms when they're nervous. So let's say you sweat or blush or stutter when you're nervous. Well, then prior to a social event, if social events are the things that make you nervous, you're probably already thinking, oh no, what if I start sweating through my clothes? What if I blush? What if I stutter? I'm going to make a fool of myself. People are going to think bad things about me. They're going to think I'm a loser. And you are getting yourself anxious before you even get out the door, before you even get into the social environment. Your anxiety has started. And as soon as your anxious thoughts start, it's creating an anxious feeling in your body. It's creating the environment where you will begin to stutter and blush and sweat before you're even in public. And then if you do end up going to the social event, you will be so nervous before you even get there that it will be incredibly painful. Or what's very likely to happen is you will get yourself so nervous beforehand, you will just decide not to go. So you will avoid going. So avoiding is a behavior that goes with social anxiety disorder, which actually in the long run makes social anxiety disorder much, much worse. So that would be one example of how this cycle might work for somebody who has physical symptoms of anxiety. Let's take a different example. Let's take an example of somebody who has a lot of social anxiety around work and work situations. And anytime there's a group meeting or they have to give a presentation or in any way they feel that they'll be put on the spot, they panic. So again, what will happen is that the thoughts will go around and around, and before the meeting ever happens, before they ever have to get up there for the presentation, they're already panicking in their thoughts. They're already feeling incredibly anxious, whether they exhibit physical symptoms or not. Not everybody does. And it will make the entire event miserable. And so sometimes people's social anxiety will begin to call in sick on those days, or they will push through, but with incredible effort. And the third example I'd like to use is with regard to the classroom. And I've seen this with young adults and teenagers and young adults when they go to college, because in high school they kind of don't have a choice about going to class. And so they may have the same type of anxiety in a classroom. They may worry about getting called on. They might be in a panic if they have to give a presentation or any sort of attention is focused on them. But in high school, you're kind of required, to go through for the most part. But then once you get to college and you can skip class, people with social anxiety will skip class, and eventually drop out of college. So social anxiety can really limit your world, limit your relationships, limit your ability to complete college, to get a good job, to work at that job. And with social anxiety, your world can just get smaller and smaller, which feels like you're protecting yourself, and you might feel like you have more control, but you will be more and more miserable because it's just not the way you want to be living. And again, the good news here is you can recover from social anxiety. However, I do want to add in here that social anxiety has a very low spontaneous remission rate, which means it is highly unlikely to go away on its own. It will take a concerted effort, either with really targeted self-help or online programs or therapy. So let's talk about these examples and how the CBT cycle can be adapted and adjusted so that you can feel better. So if you are somebody who sweats and blushes and stammers when you're anxious, it's very important prior to social events to physiologically relax yourself with diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is a key tool. It's really awesome because diaphragmatic breathing communicates to the old part of your brain that you're safe, that there's nothing to worry about here. So there are a lot of videos on YouTube about diaphragmatic breathing. I do have a free little mini course that shows you how to diaphragmatically breathe, and I will link that here as well. But that would be a number one tool to develop if you have social anxiety, and I actually would recommend practicing diaphragmatic breathing on a regular basis so that it becomes your normal way to breathe. So if you can diaphragmatically breathe prior to a social event, prior to a work situation, prior to going into a classroom, it really can help. Now, the cognition that can go with the diaphragmatic breathing is the thought that I am safe enough now. My body is responding as if I'm in danger, but I'm actually not in danger. There's actually your body is physiologically responding as if you're in physical danger. And there's probably, not obviously, there's some social situations that could be physically dangerous, but for the most part, I am pretty sure that the situations that you're feeling a lot of anxiety about are not physically dangerous. So if you can use your frontal lobe, your cognitions, to be like, there's nothing physically dangerous here. I'm going to relax my body. I'm going to breathe diaphragmatically. I'm going to reset and know that I'm safe. So diaphragmatic breathing is actually a behavioral intervention, and it can go with a change in cognition. The other changes in cognitions could be things like, what's the worst thing that happens here? What's the worst thing that happens? You go to a party and you don't have a good time and you don't talk to many people and you go home. Okay, has that happened before? Probably. How bad is it? You lived through it. That's the worst thing that happens here. Or at work, so you give a presentation. How many times have you given previous presentations and they've actually gone fine? Maybe you have an experience where you gave a presentation and it was horrible, and that one experience has tainted all the other presentations you've given that have gone fine. Or maybe you've never even given a presentation and you don't know how it's going to go, and maybe it will go great. So those are the ways to begin to work with your cognitions. And I'm not saying that this is easy. This is not easy. Your brain has been wired for social anxiety for a long time. The average age of onset of social anxiety disorder is 13 years old, which I think is very relevant given what's happening when you're 13. That's the topic for a whole nother video. But your brain has been wired this way for a long time. So rewiring your brain takes practice, 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 which is also part of CBT. CBT is practice. So changing how you're thinking about things. What's the worst thing that happens? I've actually done fine before. If you have the cognition of like, nobody likes me, nobody will ever date me, I'm a loser, and you actually have experiences where people do like you do have friends, and you have dated people before, those experiences need to be brought into your current day thinking of, I've done this before, I can do it again. And one of the key behavioral interventions is to not avoid the situations that you feel anxious about, because what happens when you avoid a situation you feel anxious about, you're communicating to your old brain, your reptilian brain, your fight, flight, freeze response that yes, this is a very dangerous situation and we are going to avoid it. We're going to run away from it. So you are reinforcing the fear. Whereas if you go through the experience and it goes okay, you're then communicating to this old part of the brain, it's all right, these things are not dangerous, these situations they're okay. And it doesn't mean it has to go great. It just means you're not in danger. There's no reason to panic. And again, I do not want to sound in any way like I think this is easy, but I do think you can do it. So I'm going to give you my top 3 recommendations of cognitive reframes that can help you today if you begin to implement these. So number 1 is curiosity about other people. So social anxiety disorder, your thoughts get stuck in the me loop. We have like a brain loop that's a me loop in our heads, and it can be useful once in a while. However, when it gets obsessive, it's very painful. It's all about, what do they think about me? What am I doing? What am I doing? Am I making a fool of myself? Do they think that I'm a fool? It's a me, 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 me. And I know you're not a selfish person. I know that, and that's not what I'm saying. However, the me loop is what's causing your pain. If it's possible to get out of the me loop and think about the other person, you won't be socially anxious. If you let go of worrying about other people's judgments by thinking about them and caring about what are they experiencing, even if you go into a situation and you think to yourself, I wonder if that person feels as nervous as I do. Because they might. Or if you go into a situation thinking, that person cares what I think about them as much as I care what they think about me. So I'm paying attention to the fact that this person cares what I think about them, so I'm going to make them feel good. I'm going to listen to what they have to say. I'm going to ask them questions about themselves, and I'm going to put my full attention on what they are saying. So that is my number 1 tool for social situations. I had a client who had extreme social anxiety around parties, large parties. She was an introvert. She liked, small one-on-one conversations, but she really disliked large parties, and she had a partner who liked them, and she was going because her partner wanted to go. And so I gave her the tool of curiosity, and it helped her enormously. I also suggested you don't need to go to a large party and talk to a lot of people. If you go to a large party and you have 3 meaningful conversations, or even 1 meaningful conversation, that's awesome. And that's much more satisfying for somebody who's introverted than, small talk and chatter with, 40 people. You don't have to go around and be friendly to everybody. You can have 1 or 2 close, connected, more intense conversations. And one way to do that is by asking about the other person and being interested in the other person. And I'm just going to throw in an aside here because I believe it was Nicholas Booth. He's a writer on these sorts of topics. And he wrote about going to a dinner party where he never said a word about himself. And he sat next to two people and all he did was ask them questions about themselves. And he really didn't say anything about who he was, what he did. He didn't answer anything. He just kept asking them questions. And each of those two guests on either side of him the next day called the host and said, I sat next to the most fascinating guy. And he hadn't said anything about himself. So people love to talk about themselves, or people without social anxiety love to talk about themselves. So that is a tool that you can use. The second cognitive reframe I would recommend is to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that happens here and can I live through it? And once you accept like the worst thing that happens, it really helps you adjust, like how bad is that? And so an example is that I'm working with a guy who has social anxiety and he was going on a date and he was very anxious about it and he was very worried about there being a lot of silence. So I asked him, like, what's so bad about the silence? And he responded, well, it's awkward. And I'm like, okay, how bad is awkward? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, have you been through something awkward before? He said, yes. I said, a lot of social interactions are awkward. In fact, first dates are awkward for everybody. So there's a lot of social gatherings and social events and social situations that are awkward. We humans were awkward, right? Like it just happens. So actually, I'm going to add that as another cognitive reframe, that becoming comfortable with being awkward is very helpful because most of us are awkward at some moments. And even those people who seem like really smooth, I guarantee you they have moments that feel really awkward. They don't know what to say. They don't know what they're doing. So back to this client. We're talking about the silence that could happen. And I also said to him, so if you sit there in silence and she sits there in silence and the silence is extended, like, yeah, I would agree that's not a great date, but it's not all on your shoulders. Do you want a second date with somebody who sits there in silence for 20 minutes? And then if the silence is actually like a minute or 30 seconds, that's great. Sitting in silence sometimes is a very nice thing. Silence is not terrible. Being comfortable with silence can be super helpful. Being a therapist, I knew that very well. Sometimes silence really helps people go deeper with what they're thinking and with what they're going to say, and it brings conversations to a new level. So silence is not always bad. However, I'm sort of weaving a couple of different things in here, but if you really go through a situation where you go out and you're on a date and you don't have much to say to the person and that person doesn't have much to say to you, well, it's not somebody you want to have another date with. And if it's temporary periods of silence, that's great. That's normal. It's awesome. So either way, there's nothing to worry about because dates are exploratory. Dates are like figuring out, does this person like me? Do I like them? Maybe, maybe not. So thinking through what's the worst thing that happens can be very helpful. Can you live through it? Is it physically dangerous? Are you okay? And the third cognitive reframe is about your negative core beliefs, because if you have social anxiety, I guarantee that you have some negative core beliefs that go through your head fairly repetitively. It could be, I'm stupid, nobody likes me, I'm not worth it. There's some kind of refrain in your brain that goes around and around and around. And becoming aware of your negative core belief and learning how to transform it. And here's one of my free resources. I have a free Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs PDF. I'm going to link it here and in the notes below so you can utilize it, because really understanding that this negative core belief is false, it probably was formed very early in childhood or in middle school when things were different and your brain didn't work quite the way that it does when you're an adult. And you also probably have a lot of experiences and evidence that go against that negative core belief. There probably is a lot of evidence. So beginning to bring in that evidence. So I hope that this video has been helpful for you, has been helpful to help you understand what cognitive behavioral therapy is, how it might work, and I highly recommend that if you are struggling with this, you do not have to continue to suffer. You can work with a therapist, you can figure out the interventions you need, you can learn not to avoid how to get through the situations and then have positive thoughts about them. Positive thoughts about, okay, I got through that, okay. Nothing bad happened. I can do it again. And gradually and over time and with practice, you can get much better and actually you can fully recover from social anxiety. So the free resources that I said I would mention are the Transform Your Negative Core Belief PDF, the mini course, the mini series. All links are below. And then if you're ready for the deep dive into really figuring yourself out, really giving yourself some deep tools to get over anxiety, to be your own best friend, to eliminate negative self-talk, then look up my program, The Awaken Joy Journey, and I'd love to know if you have any questions about it. Just put a note below, send me an email, give me a shout out, find me on social media. Till the next time.